Hey guys, welcome to another episode of El Jefe's Chop Shop. This week it's 37 degrees and I finally have the chassis that I'm putting the Supra subframes under. I'm not sure what order these episodes are going to come out, but what I'm thinking is I will have just pulled the Supra subframes out in the last episode, and now I have the chassis that I'm going to put them under. The idea is I'll work out where the wheel is now, where the wheels sit, the center line of the wheels, mark that, then pull all of this stuff out and get the Supra stuff underneath and line up the center line of the wheels with that, with this, and try and tuck it in place and just get it all started. So I'm just going to put you on time lapse. I'm just going to get stuck in. So I've done about 1 million measurements on this thing. So I think the back's going to be pretty fine, but the front is going to be a bit of a pain in the bum. So the main section of the subframe will sit about here, and that's about 10 to 15 millimeters off at the moment. So I'm going to have to cut into the chassis a little bit. And then back here where this hole is, I'm going to have to put like a pocket in there for the rear section of the arm. So this bit here, under here, there's just a pin running this way. That is going to have to get its own little pocket, and then this guy should line up with about 10 mil taken off. So I'm tempted to actually take 10 mil off of here, send it off to Aiden and get it machined down. But then obviously if I need to replace the crossmember, I need to do that again. So it's a bit of a pain, but that's an idea. But yeah, I'm thinking now I might go get some 25 mil RHS, slide it under the chassis, get all this up high enough, and then pull all this apart, get just the subframe and slide that underneath it and see if I can get it all in like a nice spot and see how it all looks. So it's been very hot, sweaty cutting all this stuff up, so I'm just still trying to stay interested and motivated, but I'm not sure how to progress because of that back bit not fitting. If that fit, then I could just slide the whole lot underneath and be happy with it, but I don't want to cut anything that I can't uncut, basically. Like I can obviously weld it back in, but the less I do wrong, the better. So I think I'll rip the rack off of this and just strip it down so it's just a cross member, and then try and put it under there, see what it looks like. So I've been cutting and chopping for quite a long time today. This is pretty much sitting on the ground. The actual body mount, like pedestal, is touching the ground. The chassis rail isn't, so that obviously sits a little bit lower. Can deal with that later, that's fine. The crossmember is currently sitting a little bit wonky. So I've done my best to get that better, but every time I keep moving it, it moves the chassis, so I'm struggling there. So I think what I need to do is come up a little bit more in the back and a little bit down in the front of the aluminium crossmember, and that'll clock it to the right direction. But that's it, pretty much centered. It did move again after I centered it, of course, but that's pretty much there. So you can see where the rack's going to go. It's going to hit straight into this front crossmember, so that's going to have to go as well. But I already knew that. I'm just trying to take out what I can, and then I'll brace in this bit, put some bolts in it, hold it all square. Then I can cut that crossmember out and make room for the rack, put another crossmember at the front, or whatever I need to do. But that's the idea, and I think it's going to work. I may have to come up on top of this rail and thicken it up a bit to brace it all in, Still talking to a mate of mine that's an engineer. We're going back and forwards a little bit. And then the back A-arm, so the bottom A-arm, like that. The back mount, where that hole is pretty much going to have to get cut out. And I have to put a piece of, imagine like a U shape with a bolt in it this way. And I have to weld all that into the chassis. So that's a later problem, and that's got to be exactly right as well. So that will do away with, or at least replace, this back section here. So I'm thinking what I'll do is mount that rear bush in the chassis rail, so the same as that but under there, and then I'll brace between those two once I've got the motor in place and stuff. Even if I brace in a little bit further back or a little bit further forwards or whatever, that's fine. I can put in heaps of braces. Once I've got the engine in, I know where it's going to sit, I can do this and then make it all fit. I'm going to stop rambling. Alright, I've been fighting this heat all day, so I'm going to go inside. I'll leave it there. I'm pretty happy with where we've gotten to, but there's a little bit more to go, a little bit more up, and then the crossmember will sit more level. So I'm going to leave it there for right now, and I'll catch you up when I work on this thing again. So I'm back out in the shed today, and I've worked out where I want this crossmember to live. So I've got some 5mm 50x50, and I've made up these tubes which are really thick for the 12mm bolt. So they're in the right place, all welded together. They're very hot right now. Got both of those ready to go. So once this cools down, I can take the bolt out, probably put them in the other way, I guess, and then lay it all underneath the chassis, drill some holes from the top so that the tubes can actually poke through the top, and then that'll get me in the right spot. So that's going to be a fair bit of messing around this afternoon, but once I get to that point, I'll show you where we're at, and this should be able to be bolted in central, everything's good to go, and then I can weld these to the chassis itself. I'll probably just tack them for now, but I can get these in place, and then hopefully the crossmember is square, centered, all that sort of stuff, and then I can start working on the next step. I've been at this for hours, and I'm so hot and sweaty. I thought this would take about 10 minutes, but here we are. So drilled a hole up here for the pin to come through, made some pins obviously. So the plan is to weld those onto the chassis, and then they're also welded to a piece of 5mm angle line. So that'll get welded to the chassis. The pins are welded to the angle line, and then they'll get welded to the chassis up the top as well. So I think I can go another 5 or 10mm lower because they're not quite on the ground. Very close, but not quite. So I probably want to pull it all apart again and then cut just the tiniest little bit off of here, and then we'll be good to go. And the other side is exactly the same. I'm knackered, so sweaty and hot. It's definitely worth that extra 5mm though, because it's getting so close to sitting nicely, and then once that's in, I can actually tack this in place, pull the subframe out, which would be nice, and then I can clean it all up and make it look pretty. But that is not a job for right now. Alright, we're off the ground. It's all cleaned up. Looking pretty good. Obviously this is early stages and I need to do a lot more work, but we can get it nice and centered, and I'll do some more measurements and stuff, but I can knock this backwards and forwards if need be. Same with that one. So I've got a little bit of wiggle room in it. So I'll come back out when I'm a little bit more motivated and measure everything 8,000 times and then give it a little tack. So looking good. I just made a huge mess though. Alright, I'm going inside, I'm going to have a shower. We'll come back to this another day. So it's been a couple of weeks since I worked on this frame, which is from a Plymouth or a DeSoto. I have shown you guys that video now, so if you haven't seen it, go and watch it. And this is what we're doing. So I was going to come back, square this guy up, tack it nice and straight, but I have since thought about it, and I actually want to flip this whole chassis over because these body mounts, so there's those two on the other side, I think that's all that's going to be in the way. I think they're stopping it from actually sitting nice and evenly on the ground. So I want to flip that over, and then I'll trim those up, give them a bit of a weld, and hopefully that'll get it to sit properly, and then I can flip it back up this way and then finalize the location of that cross member. So bit of a pain, but needs to be done. So I have the chassis up in the air here, and I was correct, which is nice. So this one was stopping it from laying on the ground nice and flat. This one, actually okay. So I need to just trim this guy up, and make it so this is the lowest part of the car, not this guy. So should be hopefully pretty simple. And while I've got it up in the air, I'll cut off what's left of the body, and then I need to do the bottom one as well. And I think that should be it. It should lay nicely then. I might go through and strip anything else that I can while it's up in the air. And the cross member didn't even fall out, so obviously I did a reasonable job of getting that to fit nice and snug. So I have decided that I don't actually have enough time tonight to clean up everything else, so I've just cut these down. Now they're nice and smooth with the bottom of the chassis. Same with that one, and it's only those two that were actually in the way. So now, instead of cleaning all this up, and I found a heap of rust here and in here and on this side, and like heaps of dirt fell out. So instead of cleaning all of that up right now, I'm just going to put it back down on the ground and try and get this subframe in the right spot, and hopefully get that tacked in, maybe even tonight. Try and get it nice and square and get it where I want it. And then when I come back to the rest of the chassis, I'll have a bit more time hopefully, and I can tidy all that up. But like all of this is all rotten. This is not a great chassis, which is why I'm messing with it. And then all here is all gross as well. So heaps to cut out and heaps to clean up, but a lot of it I won't be using anyway, so it's not going to matter. So with everything back on the ground, you can now see that there's a slight gap under the front of the chassis. So now I know that if this is cut out enough, the chassis will be nice and flat with the ground, so that will have no gap. So now I need to go back up again, up and down a bunch of times probably, and keep trimming this until the chassis sits nice and flat. So I've come up with a new contraption. So this is spacing this texture the same distance from the ground as the crossmember, top of the crossmember here is. So now what I've done is use that to draw a nice straight line here. So I'll cut that out, and then I need to copy it onto this little piece here, and then the same on the other side, and then we should be pretty close, like if not perfect. So I think on the other side I need to cut a bit more anyway. So I think it's actually a little bit lower than this one, but that should get us in the same height on both sides, and then I can slide the crossmember back under. We should be on the money. So I'll cut this out and we'll find out. That method of marking actually worked really well. There's a nice straight line along here, and same on the other side. So now I'll jack it up again, see if I can get this crossmember underneath, and then hopefully it's in the right spot. That was not a huge waste of time. That took forever, but it wasn't a waste. So as you can see, we're now sitting nice and flat along here, and it's the same on the other side. There's a heap more sticking out here, which is great because that's actually what I measured. And then the front one, obviously when I trim this guy, there'll be heaps sticking out here as well, which is awesome. Now the subframe, nice and flat on the ground. It does kind of curve up towards the ends, just here, but the middle is nice and flat. And then the chassis itself, nice and flat with the ground now, which it was not before. So that, this way and this way is correct. This way I need to check, and this way is very good. So I think I'll leave it there for tonight because it's hot and sweaty and I'm pretty over it. It's been a day at work and all that sort of stuff. So tomorrow I'll come in, I'll get this thing absolutely bang on square with everything else, and then I'll tack those frame rail additions in, and then I can start cleaning up the rest of the chassis, get this thing on a like a roller, and then I can work out where all this needs to fit, what plates I need, all that sort of stuff. And I can also work out where the engine's going, because that is kind of important. See you tomorrow night. So funny story, it is the same night. I just chucked a tape measure on this, and from the original suspension pickup points to that bolt there, exactly the same, side to side. From the front of the crossmember, where the A-arms mount, to the front of the chassis rail, exactly the same, both sides. So it's actually in the perfect spot already. Couldn't have planned that better. I did kind of plan it, but I didn't expect it to go that well. So that is awesome. So tomorrow night I can come out and just tack that in and keep moving, really. I don't know. That's awesome. So it's a new day in the shed, and it's been probably a couple of weeks since I worked on this thing. Now I have mocked up an engine in the chassis, but you guys will see that next week. So I'm trying to cover it up. If you work out what it is, ooh, big surprise, but try not to, just ignore it. So what I'm going to do today is try and get the back lower control arm mount into the chassis. So I know that the front one and the subframe is in the right spot. So what I want to do is try and measure off of that and work out exactly where the back one should be, and then put a nice bolt and pivot through there for that guy. And then hopefully I can get an arm in there, and I can put the top arm back on, and we could actually have this thing like rolling. I mean, it needs suspension to actually hold it up, but it should sit on the ground and be all connected. And if I get that done, I'll look into making the steering rack fit, because it doesn't fit, so that's another problem. So where I left you off is we had the front subframe installed, so now I need to make the second lower control arm mount over here somewhere. It's about where that hole is, which is pretty handy. So I'll start measuring and mocking up and try and get this thing in there. So moving over to the front subframe here, this is the original one out of the Supra. So this is the rear lower control arm mount I'm talking about. And what I need to do is try and copy this point and roughly how it mounts in relation to this one. Keep it in the same plane and all that sort of stuff, and get it into the chassis, because this guy is not going to fit. So I'm going to try and make those bolt into the chassis, and I can add some structure between the two at a later date. So I'll get tinkering and we'll get this thing happening. So I've had a bit of a mess around and I found some steel that will work. So this is 65 by 65 5mm, and this one here is I think 80 by like 6 or 7mm. This is like a steel lintel for a house, but you know, it all works. So what I want to do is space these 75mm. So I'll just get a piece of RHS like that, clamp that together, make that 75mm, and then I can weld all of this together, make one piece, and then I can drill a hole through here out the other side for the main bolt for the bottom steering arm, suspension arm, sorry. And then this will go underneath the chassis like that, with a bolt running sort of left to right on the screen. So that'll be nice and sturdy. I can weld it into everything. Just got to work out how to make it happen. Hot off the welder. Got those two welded back together, so I haven't done the inside one yet. I'll do that later when I know where everything's going. Just make sure I've got clearance and all that sort of stuff. But welded the top on both sides and that one side, so that's sturdy as, and because it's like 6 or 7mm, that's not going anywhere. So now I need to drill a hole, or ideally a slot in here, but I don't know if I'm going to mount this way or the other way. So I'll work out which way I'm going to mount this, and then I need to drill a couple of holes. I'll probably do a couple of holes for now because I haven't got all the tools I need, and then I can slot them out later when I get the right bits. But that should work really well, and then I can bolt it to the arm, and then I can start cutting the chassis. So I have managed to get a little bit further. So I've got the little box here, so that's drilled out for the lower control arm, and the plan is that lower control arm needs to go in so that that lines up, and then that guy is nice and square. So I'm just going to start cutting very slowly and get this cleared out so that can slide in nicely. It does need to lift up just a tiny little bit, and then I can tack this to the chassis once everything's nice and square. So I have welded this guy into the chassis. That's nice and square. I'm pretty confident with that. So now it's time to get this right. There is enough adjustment in there that I could be a little bit off and it'll like adjust out, but I'd rather get it right than have adjustment, if that makes any sense. And then while I was in here, I did realize that this is so rusty, it's actually rusted through into the chassis itself. So that mount's gonna have to come off at some point, and I'll fix that. But that one is, or does seem like the worst one. So even if I cut that off entirely, patch it, put it back on, then we're good to go. The other side's probably the same, the front one anyway. The back ones don't look too bad, but this one was like fully enclosed, so it's obviously the worst of it. But that's a later problem. Let's get this thing rolling, I guess. So I've just started cutting out these pockets. I've got all 4 sides cut, and I think the front on both is cut. I just need to now lift the chassis up and cut the back on both. They should drop out, and then we should be able to test fit one of these guys in there. I'm hoping this works like reasonably easy with not too much messing around, because it's actually a lot of difficult measuring because everything's curved and bent. So hopefully I can get it right the first time. So I'll lower the car down above this thing and hook some straps onto it, lift it up, and then cut those pockets out, and then hopefully we'll be good to go. Every time I move this chassis, dirt and crap falls out. I've got those pockets cut out, so they obviously need a lot of reinforcement, but now I can put it back down on the ground again, and then hopefully slide one of those arms under. It should be very close to in business. So I've got the rear mount tacked in. It's not very attached, but it's attached. And I just chucked the arms back on and the hubs and everything, just to see how it all lines up. And I've hooked it up to the hoist. So when I go up, I get about there before it comes off the ground. And the distance from the center of there to the ground is the same as the center of the wheel to the edge of the wheel. So I'm pretty stoked. That's all worked out pretty well. Now I need to finish off those mounts, obviously, and work out how to make this rack fit, because it does not fit very well. So that's the next problem, but I'm hot and sweaty and probably going to give up for a while, but I'm pretty stoked with that. So I'll measure all of these again a million times, and then I'll weld them in a bit better. And then once I've got all that in a nice spot, I'll start clearancing for the rack, get that in a nice spot, and then I'll flip this whole thing over and I'll finish weld everything up front here. So pretty stoked. That's coming along quite well. Pretty good. This bar is for the engine, but you'll see that next week. Nice. So I just started to pack up and went inside, and then I realized that I didn't try droop. So I'll redo these straps and we'll see how much droop I can get out of this suspension setup. It should be heaps. So I'll redo the straps and put them on the chassis. I'll lift the chassis up and let the hubs go down to the ground and see how much droop we can get. Looking good. It's a long way off the ground. The hub and disc has just come off the ground. We're probably 150 mil off here. So I should have like 400 mil of suspension travel or something. That's ridiculous. Perfect. So this suspension is relaxed and on the ground. It can probably go a little bit lower, but that'll be fine. Got 100 mil blocks there, and the back is on the ground, so that's a fair old rake. So what I'm going to do now is jack the car up, and I'll lift this hub until it reaches its full height, and then I'll measure from the bottom of the disc to the ground and see how much travel we have. So from the ground to the bottom, we've got about 34 centimeters, which for you Americans is like 13 or 14 inches, I think. So I'm pretty stoked with that. That's awesome. It's a lot of travel. It's a new day in the shed. I've got a little bit more time today, so I'm going to just jump straight into this thing. I'm going to start off, I'm going to rip the subframe out, the arms out, everything out of the bottom, and I'm going to flip this chassis over so that I can get to the bottom of all of the stuff that I've welded in, and hopefully then I can finish off the bottom and then flip it up the right way and try and finish off the top. So I'm just going to get stuck into it, just try and get as much done as I can today. But I think I'm going to have to start with taking those pedals off because they're going to stop it from laying nicely on the floor. So I've got the chassis flipped over here, and you can see the terrible job I did the other day with a couple of holes, so that needs to get cleaned up obviously. But with that aside, I've just filled in this gap here, so I'll grind these welds down later and trim this guy, but that's the idea. So now that's all capped in nicely, got it welded here, and then I need to do something with this, but I'm not sure what I'm doing with the cross member. So I don't want to join all of the cross member in and then cut it out. That doesn't make any sense. So I think what I'll do is just leave this bit for now, and I'll come back to that because I may end up cutting it straight through there. I may end up coming out to here. I don't really know, so I don't want to add like a 50 mil strip and then come out 80 mil and then have a weird little bit, and the opposite. I don't want to blank in all of this and then cut it all off. So that'll do for right this second. This guy needs to get cut and hammered back in because I think I'm going to end up running a flat plate along here and then through here into this one, so that'll have to get sorted out later. But now I need to move on to this guy and boxing in that huge hole. Great, this is going to be a little tricky I think, but I'll get this done and then I can move over to the other side, copy the same onto that side, and then I'll feel a whole lot better about this being in a good spot. This still requires some cleanup obviously, but that's all welded in. So I've got a nice big plate around the side, and everything that I'm adding is 5mm just for reference. So I've curved that to the chassis, welded it up, so I'll come back and grind that back when I'm ready to. And then the front, got there welded, underneath is welded, the upright is welded here, and then I need to do in there. I can't really do that until I've got the cross member out the way, and I need to do something here, but I want to, like I said before, leave that until the cross member's out. And then the outside, I could probably do that now, but again, depending how much of that cross member comes out, depends on how much I need to mess around. So with that, I'm going to jump over to the other side and make it look as close to this side as I can. And then I'll catch you up right now. It has been quite a few hours, but I've got this side welded up to the same point as that side. Still needs a little bit of cleaning up. Same with this bracket, needs to get cleaned up as well on both sides. The whole thing needs a once over, but most of the excess metal is gone, and most of it that I can weld in right now is welded in. So what I'm going to do now is grab the cross member and place that in here, get that bolted in, and then I want to try and work out where this rack needs to go and see if I can cut out like a minimal amount of this guy and get the rack sitting in here. So I've started cutting and this rack still doesn't fit. So this end fits, no worries, there's plenty of clearance here. This end, the pinion, I assume that's what that bit's called, needs to go right there. So that's going to have to get cut out. So to do that, I need to have some kind of structure holding this whole thing together, and I can cut the whole subframe out, or this like cross member. And to do some kind of structure at the front, I'm going to need to rebuild these because these are made of paper. So don't know how to start that right this second, but I'm going to cut these to an even length on either side, and then that's sort of there, most of the chassis rail stuff done, and then I need to work out what I'm going to do forwards of there to get all this tied in, because I can't really cut much more out for this rack without the chassis just turning to dust. So I'm gonna have to leave it there for now, I think. I'm just gonna have a bit of a play and see what else I can make and do. It's getting kind of late, so I don't really want to fire up the grinder again, but I'll make some templates and get ready to have another crack at this. So I've done a template of this chassis rail, and it comes up to the cross member here. So I think what I'm going to have to do now is flip it up the other way again, and then brace everything, and then cut all, pretty much here, cut all of that off. And all of this will go in the bin, and then I'll have to make it all from scratch. It's a lot of work. I didn't really plan for it, but I'm here for it, if that makes sense. So that's going to have to be another episode though. So I'll flip this over and show you where we're at. I have flipped the chassis over, I have got it on a dolly, and I've sort of swept up a little bit. I'll deal with that later. I'm knackered. I was very much hoping to get this front end completely finished in this episode, but it's absolutely way too much work. So there will be a part 2, and I will get it finished and on the ground. By the next episode, you will see us building an engine for this thing and making mounts and all that sort of stuff. So stay tuned for that. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next week.